Well, good morning. It's so wonderful to be with you this morning and with our teen leaders. And actually, I think there are some people who have already arrived early for IYOU out there as well, aren't you? No? Yes, they're waving. They're waving. I was waiting for a hoot or something, but trust me, they're here. And if you're around Unity Village this week, you are going to notice an influx of youthful energy that's just going to be here throughout the week. So we're excited to be here. So let me begin by asking, is everybody wide awake today? Yes? Nobody's sleeping? Great, because we're going to be talking about this today. We're going to be talking about what it means to be spiritually awake. What does that mean? Because it's sad to say the truth seems to be that we can't sleep through this awakening. As much as we'd like to. Wouldn't it be great to just kind of wake up and find it happened? Be like Christmas morning. But the Armenian spiritual teacher Gurdjieff tells us, you can't unconsciously become conscious. Something to consider. Julia Cameron, the author of The Artist's Way and other books, tells us that we are spiritual beings with spiritual business to transact on the physical plane. Isn't that cool? Spiritual beings with spiritual business to transact on the physical plane. Do you know that about yourself? Great. Because when we forget that, when we fall asleep to who we really are, we end up sleepwalking through our lives, kind of skimming the surface, never really plumbing the depths. And we can walk through life just forgetting the truth of who we are. As the poet Diane Ackerman writes, a shallow life creates a world flat as a shadow. And spoiler alert, we're going to talk about the shadow a little bit today, so just so we're all prepared. So the truth is, we're not here to sleep through it all. We're not here to skim through life. We are here to dive deep, to wake up, to truly be who we've come here to be. Spirit expressing. You know, in the Buddhist tradition, there's a story told that is comparable to the prodigal son. And in this parable, the son is a prince who wanders outside of the palace walls at a very young age and gets lost. And he forgets that he's a prince. He just wanders and wanders. He ends up living life as a pauper on the streets and forgets who he really is. And he grows into a young adult. And one day the king, who's always on the lookout for his beloved son who disappeared, spots him and says, it's him, it's the prince. And he joyfully rescues the prince, brings him back to the palace. However, the prince has lived his life as a pauper on the streets. He no longer has any memory of being a prince. He's asleep to his true self. And he can't even imagine life as a prince, let alone live life as a prince. And it takes time for him to release all of these limited beliefs that he has acquired through a life of poverty before he can actually grow into the belief that he's really of royal lineage and begin to live his life that way. So as we consider this story, think about our own journey. I mean, we learn that we are spirit expressing in the physical realm, don't we? We learn that in unity. That's our second principle. There's one presence, and the second principle, we are all expressions of that one presence, divinity expressing. But do we believe it? Do we really live our lives as if that were true? I mean, something to think about. Because that's what we're here to do, to actually wake up and be that truth expressing in the moment. The New Thought teacher Ernest Holm tells us that we are ever expanding principle of conscious intelligence. The forever expanding, never ending, eternally increasing conscious intelligence. So do we think of ourselves that way, or do we find ourselves kind of stuck in the labels that we have worn in the past and continue to wear, like our young prince? So in the morning, when you look in the mirror, do you say to yourself, good morning, ever-expanding conscious intelligence? Might be a good way to start our day. So I invite you to turn to your neighbor and say, good morning, ever-expanding conscious intelligence. Good morning, ever-expanding conscious intelligence. It's very good to know that for each other, isn't it? Okay, come on back. It's so good to know that for each other. However, knowing spiritual principle and actually practicing and living spiritual principle, two different things. Wouldn't you agree? Yes. From the book Zen Judaism, which is a wonderful little book, it's a delightful mix of Zen and Jewish wisdom mixed together. It says this: to study the way of the Buddha is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to experience the complete dropping away of body and mind. That's the Zen part. This is the Jewish part. The difficult part is keeping body and mind off after you've dropped them. Many people gain back body, mind, and an additional 15 pounds. You must then study the way of Jenny Craig. Now, it's tongue-in-cheek, but it really points out that this process is a moment-by-moment experience of returning to the present and living in that present moment as we are without taking back on those labels and things from the past that we've been carrying around with us. So what keeps me dozing away? Well, to begin with, I don't even know I'm asleep. See, I'm up here, it seems like I'm conscious. I'm aware of my surroundings. I'm not comatose, right? But what's really going on that I'm unaware of? Did you know that research tells us that there are 400 billion bits of information available to us to access in any given time, right now? 400 billion bits of information. However, our brain can only process 2,000 bits in any given second. Okay, that's 400 billion bits and 2,000 bits, right? So that's a whole lot of bits that we're just not aware of. You know, try to imagine being suddenly aware of 400 billion bits of information, what that might be like. And are you up for a little science this morning, everybody? Yeah. All right, little scientific experiment. Put on your lab coats. Ready? All right. So I'm going to invite you to look down at your foot, and as you look down at it, lightly tap it on the floor. Just lightly tap it. Watch your foot hit the floor. Okay, you can stop. Now, what is your experience of doing that, that you were watching your foot hit the floor and feeling it hit the floor at the same time? So you're watching it hit the floor, and at the same time you feel it hit the floor. Is that your experience? Well, congratulations, you just did the impossible, and it's not even noon yet. How cool is that? Because the truth is that the speed of light is vastly faster than the synaptic conduction time it takes to get that message from your foot to your brain. And you should actually see it happen before you feel it, and the delay should be noticeable. There's even a name for this phenomenon. It's called delay and antedating hypothesis paradox. Delay and antedating hypothesis paradox. You can Google that, and it will talk about what that is, exactly that. And the theory that has grown up around how this happens is that both of those activities are done separately, but the brain remembers them simultaneously. So in other words, our brain is editing our experience all the time. Does this make sense? But here's the thing. It doesn't tell us it's doing that, right? So there's a lot of stuff going on that we're unaware of, and our mind is editing our experience for us and neglecting to tell us so. And it has selective editing. It lets in certain things of those 400 billion bits that is relevant to us. So the question is, how does it know which 2,000 bits to let in? How does it know? Are you ready? Okay, here's how it knows. It goes through the filters of the way that I view my world. All right? So I'll explain more about this as we go on. The editing depends on the filters through which I view my world. And these filters are formed from decisions that we made about ourselves at a very young age and about life, right? And they become beliefs that are just underneath the surface of our awareness. We don't even know that this is going on. And so, for instance, if I have a belief that the world is unsafe, what will my experience be? What will I find out from what's going on around me? What will I experience? That's right. I will find the myriad ways to prove to me that life is unsafe, right? I will gather evidence to support the belief that I have that life is unsafe. And I won't even be aware that I'm doing it or that I have these hidden filters. All I'll know is that life is unsafe. That's just how it is. You know, I didn't make this up. Here's my evidence right here. Right? What if I believe that there's something wrong with me deep inside? Okay, and what will I discover then about life? Will I find evidence that I'm ever expanding conscious intelligence if I'm seeing life through the lens, through the belief that there's something wrong with me? No, that's right. So if I took on a belief at a very young age there was something wrong with me, what I will do is repress that belief since it's too painful for me to look at directly. And instead, I might decide that it's really about someone else. He's the problem. There's something wrong with him, right? Anyone could see that's true. And we all do this. You know, it's part of the human condition. We project what's too painful to look at, and we keep it out there. And it's a symptom of a newly discovered disease that I just made up. It's called Humanity Sleeping Disorder, HSD, or sleep apnea of the soul. So this is not about blame, and it's not about beating ourselves up. It's just what happens in the human realm. You know, metaphysics does us no good if we use it to inflict guilt and shame upon ourselves or others or wallow in self-judgment. Are you with me on that? Yes. It's about compassion. It's about self-compassion. It's about having compassion for everyone on the journey. Our parents, our teachers, our childhood friends, the classroom bully, everybody who's been a part of our process as we, in this path that we're on. Because we're all walking around with these unconscious patterns of behavior and forgetting the amazingness that we are. Really, suffering from HSD. And we are so courageous. Do you know how much courage it takes to walk through life unaware of the magnificent beings that we are? Really? All of you, all of us, courageous. But the bottom line is that the world will mirror back to us what's really going on in our psyche. And when we have these disowned parts of ourselves that we don't want to look at, we're repressing, it's called the shadow. We project them out onto the world, and we attribute that to be the problem. And with all this muck that gets in the way, we lose sight of the preciousness of the divine presence that we truly are. We really do. Now, is there hope for us? The correct response is yes. So let me give you some good news. Are you ready? Lean in. This is important. Our projections can help us to awaken. Ooh. We might think of them as compassionate alarm clocks, as Byron Katie calls it. Because when I make a judgment about someone else, that's a pivotal wake-up moment for me, if I choose to use it that way. You know, we can pray, we can meditate, we can go to classes, we can go to retreats, workshops, we can read books to learn all about spiritual principle. I love all that stuff, don't you? Yes. But you know where the rubber meets the road? Right in that sort of realm of human relationship. that arena that we all live in. That's where we roll up our sleeves and really walk the spiritual path. Especially a relationship with someone who can push our buttons. Do you have someone like that in your life? Anyone? They can quite often be very conveniently close at hand. And they are so valuable for us because they clearly show us places in need of healing with great accuracy. It's like zeroing right in on it, you know? It's like finding a sore spot, right? Why does it hurt to have our buttons pushed by someone? Because it goes to one of these places we don't want to see, some belief that's we're hiding from ourselves and then projecting it out. Now, hear me clearly. I am not suggesting anyone stay in any kind of an abusive relationship of any kind, so don't hear that from me. If you are in an abusive relationship, I'm saying you need to get yourself safe. So I'm not talking about that. What I'm talking about are those irritations, you know, the socks on the floor, the little annoyances that kind of because those paper cut moments are amazingly ripe for spiritual growth. They really are. And yet this is when we would all much rather hit the snooze button. And rather than seeing the value of having our buttons pushed. But when we use these moments as these events as awakening moments, now the work becomes dealing with that inner button. Do you see? It shifts from trying to fix it out here to going, what is it about that's bothering me? Let's take a look and let's get curious about it. You know, there's a story. Did you know that the samurai warriors learned to do battle with each other by hitting each other's pressure points? I have to tell you, from my martial arts background, I know those very well. It's quite an interesting way to do battle. And so they're pushing each other's buttons in a big way, you might say. And there's a story told of one samurai who was soundly defeated using this method of combat. And so he gave it all up and he went into the forest to contemplate life for 20 years. 20 years later, he once again meets his opponent, his previous opponent, who challenges him to another fight. And the samurai agrees, and this time the other fighter is surprised to see that no matter how often he hits those pressure points, there's no reaction. And the samurai explained that he had spent his time in contemplation working with the pressure points and changing them so that they were no longer available to be triggered. Now, in a sense, that's the work we do. We become aware of those sore spots within us that get triggered, become curious about what that is, curious about it. And then discovering what's behind it, we can make that internal shift. And then what happens? Those spots lose their ability to send us over the edge. They actually become portals to our awakening. Because here's what we really start to see. That's not who I am. I am light. I loved the song. It just was so appropriate to this. We start to see, okay, maybe why is this pushing my button? Maybe I have this belief that there's something wrong with me, but that's not who I am. It's just a mistaken, faulty belief. Do you see the power in this? The freedom in this? Because the truth is we are ever expanding conscious intelligence. Now here's the thing, we don't usually do this work too willingly. Nobody wants to look at their stuff, really. I mean, can't we hear ourselves saying, this is negative energy? I don't want to mess with this. I didn't come to church to hear this today, right? I'm all about being positive and affirming the truth. That's me. Yes, absolutely. We do that in unity. We're all about speaking the truth. But as we're busy affirming, it can be very easy to ignore the denial part of the equation. And we can affirm our good all we want. But if there is something that is sabotaging the success that we're unaware of, will transformation happen? No. Here's the thing, we can pretend the shadow doesn't exist and ignore it. Does it go away? No. It's having an effect whether we know it or not. And those unconscious self-limiting beliefs are much more impactful when we're unaware of them. They cause more havoc in our life when they're simmering away under the surface, you see, than when they're brought into the light of day. Here's the thing to remember. Pain not transformed is pain transmitted. I want to write that one down. Really. Pain not transformed is pain transmitted in some way, whether it's internal, external, and it often will slip out when we least expect it. It's like holding a beach ball under the water, you know, it takes all this energy to keep it down, and then it slips up over there. Have you ever said something that you go, whoa, where'd that come from? Anyone? So you know what I'm talking about here, right? We are creative beings, and we are always creating, either consciously or unconsciously. And as our co-founder Charles Fillmore said, to be ignorant of mind and its laws is to be a child playing with fire. So awakening means becoming aware of where these default patterns of behavior, these limiting beliefs are running our lives, and being empowered to make a new choice. And the class that Reverend Diane is teaching is actually designed to help bring that to awareness. This work is empowering, it's enlivening, it's freedom. This is true freedom, to live our lives as who we have come here to be. Yeah, unencumbered by those thoughts, those beliefs, those attitudes, those filters that we have accumulated over the years, becoming aware of when we're sabotaging our success through these ingrained patterns of behavior, and having the power in the moment to make a new choice. Now, we do all this through the power of the heart and compassion. And from this higher view of the intelligence of the heart, we realize that consciousness trumps it all. Do you see? We have to go to that place of compassion, self-compassion, compassion for each other. Author Tam McCabe writes, as we set free a previous definition of who we've been, we can gracefully become what life is directing us to be. And she adds, without familiar crutches, we discover wings. Don't you love that? We are limitless. We are divine potential. We have access to a higher dimension of creativity, and we do not serve this world by playing small. Don't you feel it's time? Really, it's time for us to be truly free, to be who we've come here to be, here to make a difference in the world, not just to sleepwalk through the whole thing, but to realize that we have the freedom, the power, the ability in the present moment to live a heart-centered, compassionate life as conscious, aware expressions of spirit. Isn't that cool? Really, love it. So let me just leave you with the words from the poet Mary Oliver as she speaks about really living life. When it's over, I want to say, all my life, I was a bride married to amazement. I was a bridegroom taking the world into my arms. When it's over, I don't want to wonder if I've made of my life something particular and real. I don't want to find myself sighing and frightened or full of argument. I don't want to end up simply having visited this world. So I invite you to remember that you are a spiritual being with spiritual business to transact on this physical plane, to dive deep into the present moment and feel the wonder and the joy of discovery that comes from living an awakened life as ever-expanding conscious intelligence. Are you ready? Yes. All right. Namaste.